Hello, friends, and welcome to Worldbuild with us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Courtney Staples. On today's episode, we have a brand new listener prompt that we're going to dive into. But before we do, I would like to remind everyone that if you want us to build your world, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com, where you can click the link, follow some instructions, and within a reasonable amount of time, we'll be building your world. If you want to follow us on social media, we're on YouTube. So if you're listening to YouTube on the World Build with Us YouTube, hey, hi there. Thank you. Appreciate it. And we're on Twitter at Let's World Build. If you want to come and talk to us more directly, of course, you can do so in our Discord with a link for that in the description. Or if you're feeling particularly generous and just want to give us some money or get sweet, sweet patron-only goodies, you can go ahead and do so over on our Patreon, where you get access to the Aphid Lounge, which is our patron-only podcast, and all sorts of other good stuff. Too Hot for Broadcast. You get the patron-only Discord. You get 2 episode length instead of just 1 for your prompt. So if you have an idea that you really want to see fleshed out better, hey, become a patron. Toss in your suggestion. We'll do that for you. But with all of that out the way, let's go ahead and dive right into our newest suggestion, our newest prompt, which comes from JG. And the prompt is, in this world, souls and memories are tangible commodities. They can be bought, stolen, traded, and sold. Wealthy individuals or organizations might collect rare or desirable memories and souls, creating a class hierarchy based on the possession of these intangibles. Black markets for illicitly obtained memories or souls could thrive. The tenets. Tenet number 1, the magic system is based on the 7 chakra, aka the third eye, the crown chakra, and we're going to get into that, I'm sure, throughout the world building process. Tenet number 2, extracted memories and souls are kept in a physical state, for example, an amulet or crystal or an orb. And tenet number 3, there must be a magic school. So, Courtney, why don't you kick us off, get us started? What is the first tenet that you're bringing to this soul building world?
Yeah, I was drawn to the idea of wealthy individuals and trading and stuff. So I was thinking that akin to art auctions in the modern world here on Earth. In this world, there is a major auction event that takes place in which the wealthy elite gather to bid on like the most desirable souls of, ancient heroes or important cultural figures, creators of the past, politicians, what have you. And it's obviously very exclusive, and the souls go for like enormous, disgusting amounts of money or whatever they're traded for. And it's this big event in this world.
I fucking love that. I love so much about that. That's such a cool concept that you're running with, Courtney. Because immediately my brain goes to the heist, right? Like you have an Ocean's 11 opportunity, except you have the souls of heroes, right? Like that's so cool.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to draw attention to as we're talking about souls is that the prompt it interchanges the word souls and memories, which I think is very telling, at least from their understanding of what soul is or what they're trying to tell us. Because when someone says soul, they think they're like their immortal essence that it transcends the material realm or whatever, their identity and everything. But this prompt is saying to us that a soul or your identity is your memories, your history. So that's something that I think to keep in mind. It's interesting then also, as you're suggesting this like crazy auction house sort of deal of souls, it's like, a trading in people's memories, like in history.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So that colors, I think, the setting, because it's not so much that we're dealing with this, Judeo-Christian idealist kind of view of the soul. It's this almost like very material idea that the soul is a recording of your knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I do find the idea that the soul is created and like turned into an object is really interesting, because I think what I'm now kind of seeing from like Courtney's like big super rich auction event, I'm just thinking about like a lot of the repatriation stuff that's happening with like the British Museum and stuff like that right now. And I'm
Mhm.
imagining that like that is got to be part of like the history of this particular world, is like who claims ownership of this particular hero's soul, right? Or like this particular activist's soul or something like that, right? Like all of that is very interesting because you can say a lot about like the imperialist nature of kind of like art theft, and I mean, we're literally dealing with soul stuff and memories here. So yeah, there's just a lot that we can kind of do when it comes to that kind of thing.
Yeah, like with the British Museum, what's going on there is, they've taken and accrued so much over the years and are reluctant to return things to
Yes.
their home countries, and it's basically robbing those countries of their own culture and history, and
Yes.
in this case, it would be like robbing them of their literal memory of their
Yes.
own history, like
Yeah. Literal cultural figures.
literal
Yeah.
actual memory. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So I feel like I want to piggyback off of this one because one of my tenets also deals with this idea of like the soul as commodity, the soul as good, because I feel like I recognize part of this prompt in other settings that we've built previously. Like I know that we've like
Yeah.
done some stuff that's very similar to this before.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so, in order to ensure that we do something that is slightly different, my first tenet is once the soul or memory has been forged into an item, it loses any kind of like essence or magical properties that made it what it once was. So, for example, like you wouldn't have like the ability to replay a memory or like relive moments in someone's life or soul with these objects. They literally become inanimate objects that no longer hold like magical or arcane or mystical power. Whatever power that they have is entirely tangible and it is cultural in importance.
So can you expand more? So are you saying that the object just becomes an art object that has no actual powers?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Mm.
That is kind of what I was thinking because I like the idea that what happens when you do this process like removes the kind of like essence or magic of the thing. So it becomes a lot more not deadly, but like it becomes more about the destruction of that. And so when we talk about like literally destroying the soul of a thing or a person, it is not literal. And mind you, like when we do that with memories and whatnot, I'm not going to suggest that we sit here and like we lose people to memories or we lose like the hero that once was. Like it's more about just turning that intangible into something tangible, and it is immutable once it's in that state. Now obviously I would imagine that there are ways that we can like mess with that later down the road, but for the base level, that's kind of my tenet.
It reminds me of a movie called Cold Souls, with I think it's Paul Giamatti maybe, where their souls, it wasn't their souls, but it was like their identities were literally converted into these mundane objects.
Mm.
And there's like a psychologist involved in the movie. It's a very weird, quirky movie, but the object ended up expressing how the person was in their life.
Ooh.
So oftentimes, I think like there'll be like a green pebble or something really pathetic sometimes if you really accomplish nothing. But then it's like if you were like exuberant or a personality, the object would be more interesting.
Mhm.
There
Mhm.
might be something to work with that.
So I was curious, like, how do you know if they're actual soul objects then, as opposed to just a random, gold necklace that somebody made? Like, what defines that?
I mean, I think one that's kind of like the fun of it a little bit is that you can have like forgeries and stuff like that. But two, like when you were talking about the auction and stuff like that, I was imagining that like because initially I was thinking well, like you're using raw materials, but now I'm kind of thinking like maybe they manifest as literal art objects, So it's like you can have replications of like the Mona Lisa, but we all know which one's the real one, even though it might be a forgery, right? Like I think that there is something unique and specific to that object that is like, oh, that is so specific to that person and individual. Although I think that there's a lot to be said about like a hero or someone who has a very plain or replicatable or duplicatable. I don't know. Words are hard, but something that can be reproduced over and over again, right? Like, so if you have like the queen's soul and it just so happens to be like a pearl, then it's like, oh yeah, like you don't know which one's actually going to be the queen's soul or something like that. I'm just tossing stuff out there. I'm not entirely sure how to answer that question.
I think what Courtney might be hinting at too is the possibility of forgery, which I think would be interesting.
Yeah, no, I'm all down for forgery.
Well, yeah, forgery, but also just like, yeah, wondering what would the giveaway be for like the real, like with art, you know, with the Mona Lisa, we know it's Da Vinci because of like the way that he did his painting, the colors that he used, the style, the way that the paint was applied, like the sketches underneath, you know, stuff like that. And I'm wondering like what about the soul objects is clearly like, yes, that is a soul object. Like I've studied this stuff. Like is it an aura, a magical aura that it gives off? Or is it something about the object itself? Like it's so perfect that it couldn't possibly be forged by a person, you know?
I may have an answer for you, Courtney.
Ooh.
In the form of your tenant, Daniel?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Oh, man, look at that segue. Let's go. Let's hear it, Daniel.
Well, in reading about chakras, you know, just generally, your general Wikipedia research, which we do in 2024, the age of TikTok. One of the things that I've stumbled upon, which I've also liked reading about separately, is Madame Blavatsky and the Theosophists.
Oh, yes. Oh, my God. Yes. Okay.
She was a late 19th century, early 20th century character who put about that time period, I think, who kind of put together a school that was interested in basically it's like Western esoteric stuff, like occultism. She was kind of a charlatan and a lunatic. But the idea with my prompt is that there's this school of theosophists or psychics in particular who I originally wrote collect the soul stuff or memories in order to reveal an underlying truth behind all religions, like a giant metaphysical puzzle. But I think what would be interesting here is if they are, in a sense, those art, what do you call it, forensic types, like that you would normally have, like for regular art, like looking at all the aspects of how a piece is constructed. And I bet that maybe that's their profession, right? But there is a secret school to meet the prompt's requirement where they're training, they're secretly training to collect certain pieces because they believe that they're part of a larger whole, these souls that reveal something about the world. And so like they have a vested interest to really make sure these pieces are actual soul stuff, but I'm sure they're also schemers because, like you were saying, Courtney, like certain museums don't want to let go of their stuff, right? And art holders don't want to let go of their stuff. So maybe they like lie to buy certain ones cheaper, you know, maybe they create forgeries. I picture them as being not exactly scrupulous and also led by a Blavatsky sort of figure.
Yeah, I could see them like potentially flooding the market to lower the prices of certain types of souls or like misidentifying on purpose of like, oh, this actually isn't this old hero's soul. It's just some like rando that you might have heard of once in history class. I'll take it off your hands for pretty cheap though. You know, stuff like that.
I think it also helps us recontextualize the art auction a little bit more because if there is this school, this theosophist school that kind of exists in the background, and they're attempting to put together a giant divine puzzle using soul stuff and soul objects as a thing, like I think that the auction now becomes a lot more significant because obviously if there's one group that exists that believes in the divine puzzle, there's going to be at least one other. Right? Like, even if there are purely charlatans, like, oh man, there's going to be, because, you know, like Blavatsky birthed schools, like Aleister Crowley was also one of her disciples, I believe. But like, I think that you see like multiple factions surrounding this kind of concept now.
I could see a Crowley, like a student of hers turning against her to create his own like faction, you know, that might be interesting.
Yes. Okay, if you ever want to fall down a rabbit hole, you should do some reading on Madame Blavatsky. I find her to be such a fascinating historical character. She's so weird, and it's so great.
And just like Aleister Crowley's triangle hats.
Oh yeah. I mean, oof. Speaking of another a character who you can do like a rabbit hole on, Aleister Crowley is fascinating.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Um,
There's a lot there. Even just his
oh,
wiki articles. Go give it a look and
oh man,
be amazed.
there is so much to both of those characters that like we simply do not have time for. But yes, I agree with you entirely, Courtney. Okay. Speaking of Courtney, let's get back to your second tenet. Hit us with your second tenet. What do you got for us?
So I haven't totally fleshed this one out, but basically I wanted to talk about how the souls exist before they're captured. And I'm thinking that they exist in some sort of ghost-like state where they must be harvested or like tempted back into the material realm in some way. And I'm not sure if this would be like a ritual offering that's made by like soul forgers or whatever they are, or if it would be I don't know, something much more like magical where you're whipping up spells to drag these souls in the direction that you want. But I didn't want to lose sight of the fact that like the souls are somewhere after a person dies,
Mhm.
presumably. But basically, I'm just picturing that there are souls around at all times. It's just a matter of being able to see or capture them.
So we're gonna go ahead and take proton packs out of the equation right away, right? Like, is that are we?
And what's the genre that we're gonna be here?
I mean,
What's
that's
the
kind of what I'm
time
thinking
period?
right now. Yeah.
This becomes a question of what sort of setting are we dealing with, and
Yeah.
mood, right? Tone, which is what you're getting at. Like,
Mhm.
if you go with the classic fantasy setting, you're going to end up with like wizards and
Yeah.
rituals and so forth, right? But referencing Cold Souls, like that was a psychology, like discussion, and then a little
Mhm.
procedure, which is a modern setting. So it's like
Mhm.
we could
Yes.
go many different directions with that.
So I was
Yeah,
joking
yeah.
about the proton pack, but thinking of like Madame Blavatsky and stuff like that is the time period that I'm thinking of. And occultism back then was so in vogue and like so like massive. I'm also thinking about like spirit photography,
Yeah.
where like people would literally try and take pictures of the dead in some way. And I feel like that's kind of an interesting way because one, that's like a very clear aesthetic that we now nail, right? Like the Madame Blavatsky angle and like the vibe of it feels very much like late 1800s, maybe even early to late 1800s. Like we can kind of look at that kind of pastiche. And I also feel like we don't really have a lot of settings that fit within that kind of aesthetic, you know?
I'm now thinking maybe there are multiple ways to do this, and it is very like practitioner dependent or culture
Sure.
dependent on how they go through with it. Like I do like the idea definitely of like spirit photography. I could also see like basically Ouija boards of sorts being
Oh,
used,
yeah. Yeah.
things like that. And then potentially like more either scientific and or magical things like
Hmm.
proton packs or just whipping up, exorcism spells or whatever.
Hmm.
I like that.
So I think it could be,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a great idea.
variety, and like that would also lend towards like, different groups, different cults have different methods,
Hmm.
and maybe that also imparts a certain aura or something
Hmm.
on the object that eventually comes about with the soul.
Yeah. I love that a lot.
It also would inform perhaps the quality of the object, right? Like if I was a
Yeah.
very skilled practitioner and I really wanted to capture the memory of the person, like their not just their memories, but their quality, their character, I might have to be very skilled to get that in the shape of the object, right?
Mhm.
Versus say I'm, the cheap proton pack around the corner Ghostbusters who you pay,
Hmm.
$199 to get it done quick from the corpse before they pass away, right? And then you end up with like
Hmm.
this janky, antique that just doesn't really capture them properly.
Oh man, yeah. Talk about
Mhm.
forgeries. Okay, hold on. When we were talking about forgeries previously, we were talking about like faking the item itself, but like what if you're just doing like a bad forgery of the soul? You know what I mean? Like it's like you're not capturing the
Yeah.
essence properly, so you're not getting the full picture. You're not getting the proper quality of the thing that you should be getting.
So it's like a great value brand, like
Exactly.
Like fast fashion of souls, basically, where you're just
Costco
churning
soul.
them out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then like what happens to souls if they're like only partially brought back, or like is this something where, if the soul is captured, it's like gone forever,
Mm,
or does it still linger?
Well, that's a good question because I think you're
yeah.
asking, is the object the soul or is it a representation of the soul? Like, what exactly does the prompt say again? Let me look it up real quick. 1 second. Let me open this up. I just want to read it again myself because
Sure.
I
Yeah.
feel like, here we go. So it says, they're commodities by soul, collective acquiring class. So, yeah, so the way that it talks about the memory of the soul is that the art object is the soul in a physical state,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
So if it's imperfect, you're asking like, if it's imperfect, like, is there like remnants of it that are left over? Is that your question?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Also, imagine like the agony of that spirit whose
Yeah.
soul is being ripped apart piece by piece rather than whole cloth, right? Like that is also something that we can kind of take into consideration here as well,
Yeah, this also like makes me wonder if originally, far in the past, if this soul capturing or forging or whatever had started as a form of like punishment, like
Oh.
to take from the 1999 classic Brendan
Oh, go
Fraser
on.
film, The Mummy, just the idea that like, people might have found these objects or learned of this practice and been like, oh, that's a fascinating way to preserve the dead or something like that. But in
Mm,
reality, maybe it was like an eternal punishment of like, we're not just going to like capture your soul, we're going to like wipe it clean basically by putting it into this
mhm.
object, you know?
Oh, okay. First of all, great idea, Courtney. Like really, really cool.
Mhm.
What I'm hearing from that is that this phenomenon to our world is fairly new, right? Like that's kind of what that implies is that the practice itself is ancient, right? But the commodification and using these objects as art or as cultural artifacts, that's like a new thing. So maybe we can see the invention or the use of like technology and like spirit photography as an extension of what is an ancient and inherently magical thing. I'm thinking about Walter Benjamin's Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, which basically says that like original art or art in the earlier days is like has an aura about it because it requires so much more effort. It requires you to be able to see the thing in real life, right? Whereas like modern reproducible art, you can just take a picture and anyone can take that picture. And so Benjamin kind of says that it's like a way for us to democratize or socialize art in a way. And obviously that's not necessarily true, but the idea is that you're taking away a lot of the power and the magic and aura of something by turning it into something reproducible and mechanical as a result.
Yeah, that makes me think too when I took a class on it was called technomusicology, but it was basically about like the history of music and sort of the modern era, and also like learning how to produce music and stuff. But one of the things that we went over was just the democratization of music over
Mm,
time with like recordings, and the way that for a long time the so-called popular composers like Sousa and his kind of marches and stuff were looked down upon as being like uh, common music and not enlightened and just something that anybody could play, and it wasn't true music because it wasn't being played by like a symphony orchestra.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
Which as an aside, it's funny, so sad to see that always continues with each generation. We look down on things that we don't approve of right away,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
just like thinking to that, and like the wax cylinders that were used to
Mhm,
produce music, and how maybe that is what's also kind of going on here. Like you have those lower quality souls that we were
mm,
discussing, the great value brand ones that are maybe they're not even like permanently extracted in their physical state, like a wax cylinder that can degrade over time and wear down, and eventually it's just completely lost. Whereas the higher end symphony orchestra style souls, like they are around forever. Um, and felt like I was going somewhere else with this, but I've probably
I mean, what you're saying makes me think we are assuming that a soul has to be extracted from someone who's dead, but that doesn't have to be true necessarily. Like in
Yeah, it's
the movie
true.
I referenced, Cold Souls, the reason why they extract their souls is to remove their worries, and he realizes that this also makes him kind of a dead person. And I could see, because the prompt says, wealthy individuals, organizations are collecting these things. I could imagine people unburdening their memories into these objects, willingly, as opposed to having to get these souls, as the person's dying. Like, there's nothing in this that prevents us from saying you have to have a soul to be alive, especially since
Oh,
it's
yeah.
described as
Ooh.
memories. You know what I mean?
That's horrifying, Daniel, and I like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I was taken by Courtney's idea as well as this idea of fidelity. Like how perfect is the copy of the soul? Like just like how good is the quality? Is it like an MP3 or is it FLAC? Like and that like level of capture maybe matters more than it should, or maybe matters a little bit. I don't know.
Well, is it a copy? Like, that's the other question we have to answer.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
is this a replication or is it an extraction? 'Cause it says extracted, right? But that
Yeah.
could mean you can extract the file and make a copy, right? Or does it
Yes.
mean that you're removing it from one place and embodying it? It sounds like I think the intent of the prompt is you're removing and embodying. Because if it was copied, we'd have a whole different situation in our hands, because then the person could still have their soul. But the question of fidelity, like you guys are talking about, when the extraction happens, like, does that the question is, does that mean the perfection that's lost, is it lost forever? I think maybe I could answer that with the theosophists. Maybe the theosophists believe that the process of embodying souls is imperfect, and the collection of all these objects could help them find the lost perfection in the larger scheme. So by understanding the total lattice, right, which is their whole mission, maybe then they can recover the imperfection, and that's how they understand the underlying truth.
I love the idea that theosophists are trying to refine the soul in some way. Like that adds this kind of esoteric or like spiritualist kind of sense to it that is like really mystical, even in an age where like it feels more mechanical right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it makes me think to the art historians who basically go into artworks and like touch up things that have faded or cracked over time, and how much training that takes to get it accurate. And then you also have, random people in random churches painting over old frescoes of Jesus.
Oh my God, I'm so glad that you brought that up. I was literally talking to my wife about that last night. I was like, have you seen Monkey Jesus? Because that's what it looked like. That's what the new fresco looks like.
Yeah.
Oh man, yes.
But yeah, stuff like that where like there are probably a lot of very legit ones in your group, Daniel, who like are very talented and can, repair and bring things back to their original state more or less, but they're also probably really
Mostly charlatans.
right, really shitty ones. You're like, oh yeah, I can totally fix that up for you, and then you get it back, and it's like not even the same object that you gave them in the first place. Also brings to mind like JPEG artifacting, when you share, like repeatedly save a JPEG and share it and save it over and over again, how it just gets like more and more broken down. Yep, pixelated and blurry and fucked up. And I could see that happening too as souls are exchanged or like kind of turned into different things over time.
I love that. I really do love that, Courtney. That's really good. Well, if that is the case, I suppose we're moving on to the next tenet, which is me again. My second tenet was very simple, and it was the magic school is inherently evil. So, considering that we now have a range of magic schools, I'm not sure how to take that. So, I have potentially I have a second one instead, but I'm not sure if I dig that one nearly as much. But my second alternate was there are 4 different houses of magic school, each of them being a combination of 2 chakra. And I know that there's 7. That's kind of the point.
Yeah.
So which of those 2 do you think works best with what we're working with here right now?
When you originally said your first one, it's like, oh, that's like fairly straightforward and simple. But I could also see it potentially applying to all magic schools if we go in the sort of almost like conspiracy direction of like we have this auction with these really wealthy people bidding on souls. We have these people trying to bring all these souls together to somehow form a bigger picture of what's happening or unlock something potentially or learn something about the universe. And I feel like it could all get into the realm of like, the elites at the top are actually this sort of Illuminati type of group that runs the auction, that controls the schools, that, all this sort of thing where it's like all tied into the same lizard reptilian group in the background.
So we want our big bad to be Sotheby's, then, is what I'm hearing from
Yes. Yep.
Okay, got it.
We're also talking about the how we integrate the individual chakras into things, because I feel like we haven't really talked about that, but I also wonder if perhaps it's a classification system, like souls fit into a chakra, or like you're saying, one or more. The prompt talks about deriving types of magic from each one, but I feel like we've in a sense rejected that because the items themselves don't do anything. They have cultural value now. Yeah. But I think they may have mystical value in that the theosophists are trying to restore something else that they're based on, and that's how the chakras classifications may matter. Like if this soul has been reduced to like a lump of coal and there's only a little tiny fragment of the actual soul left, the theosophist may understand that this is in fact, an eye chakra, and he knows the way to restore it,
Okay. Daniel, yes, absolutely. I think you've inspired me, as you often do, Daniel. But a couple of things. One, the prompt doesn't say that the soul items are inherently magical. It just says that chakra is tied to magic.
That's what I think.
Yeah. So what I think would be really interesting is if the soul is made up of 7 parts, right? Each one representing a specific chakra. And extraction is how well do those elements blend together? Are they one like whole object, or are you extracting it chakra by chakra, which would kind of imply or suggest like poor fidelity or poor extraction method in some way? What do y'all think about that? Because I feel like that's a way that we can kind of put like craftsmanship into focus when it comes to like the soul extraction and stuff.
What I'm saying is that the prompt originally says the chakras reveal specific types of magic, but I'm thinking that the souls belong to one or more chakras in the sense that they're categorized that way. So the craft of fixing them, like theosophists probably specialize in certain types of chakras, and maybe the way that they're originally created also entails that. Although I don't know if I almost feel like the chakra portion of this might be secretive. Like maybe the author isn't even really aware of that.
That's actually a great point. I love that is like specific, like, because now I'm thinking about like esoteric books of like the 7 paths or something like that, where each one is revealed to be a different chakra. And like that is esoteric occult knowledge that very few people have, are privy to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like if we go in that conspiracy direction, that could even influence the way that the government and schools are structured. Like maybe there are 7 schools that you walk the path of, or what have you, or like, and I could see it if you zoom way out and look at it from a top-down view, it does all tie back into the chakras, which are these secret, like cult-esque kind of things.
Ooh, okay. So maybe if we want to dive into the conspiracy aspect, maybe the modern schooling is all about teaching the 6 chakras, or maybe even 5. Right? Like have them be the terrestrial ones, but stuff like the crown chakra, which is often about like spirituality and fulfillment and like, kind of the mystical or cosmic. Maybe that's the stuff that gets, really isn't taught or like integrated into systems, because it's like they're trying to suppress that aspect within the culture,
Yeah, I do like that.
Okay, we've integrated the chakras. We've done it.
I wonder if that like secret chakra also has to do with the souls losing their their nature, basically, when they're extracted, when they're put into these objects or converted to the objects. Like maybe that is the missing piece, where if that was a part of the process, then the soul would retain some of it. And maybe that's what this sort of Illuminati group in the background is trying to do, is like bring those things back. But they want themselves to be the only ones who know, so that they do have that power to make it happen.
I love that. It's like the seventh chakra is the chakra of perfection.
Yes,
and so that's what they're seeking, because if they can have the chakra of perfection, then every broken object can be restored and they can know the total truth.
Exactly. Yeah, because their extraction methods are imperfect, because that last seventh chakra is like damn near impossible, or like not enough people know about it yet, or something like that. Yeah, that's Daniel and Courtney both love that, love all of that, love what's going on, for sure.
I also want to bring back the notion of being able to take out your soul while you're alive. And I wonder if that's something that's rarer to do. And I wonder if the theosophists deliberately do that to themselves for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and yeah, that's kind of interesting, because like what happens if you take out like the heart chakra, right? Like you take out your love and acceptance, right? Or it's like, you know, I don't need my sensuality, I don't need to be sexy, I don't need to be like have creativity, so I take out my sacral chakra or something like that, you know? Like what does each of those things mean, and what happens? Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot going on there that's really cool. I love that.
I mean, other questions that get raised, you know, when we've been talking about a chakra as one object from one person, which would suggest then that the person is more of one of the seven things than the others, because I guess it gets embodied in that way. So there's options you'd have in designing this as a setting or a story, and that, like Rob was saying, you could extract multiple pieces of yourself to make multiple objects, which would be interesting. Or you could say the person as a whole is mostly heart, right? And so when their soul is extracted, they get a heart chakra, right? So there's a couple of directions to go, which can give you options.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like when you think about like spiritualism that deals with chakras, right? Like you're thinking about what is blocking your chakra from like expansion or opening and stuff like that. And they're often like, you know, material needs, or like emotional needs, or like literally like things that are preventing you from progressing as a human in some way, right? Like that's usually how it's treated anyway. So the idea that like, yeah, the rich man who only cares about money and wealth, like, yeah, he's got all sorts of chakras that are blocked off because that's all he cares about. And he's not able to achieve that kind of ascendant, or like, you know, I think that there's something to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, with like the removing parts of yourself, that does make me think that the theosophists are quote unquote purifying themselves to go further up in their ranks, and at the top are the ones who have removed basically all of it, and that potentially gives them some sort of power, or maybe they just think it gives them some sort of power because they've kind of lost their humanity in a way.
I like the latter.
Yeah, like they think that they have the ability now to, like, you know, see the universe for what it truly is, but really they've just like ripped out everything that makes them human in the first place.
Right.
I love that, because I like, there's a sense. I remember is it the Church of Thelema, which is Corelli's, I think, is the phrase of his is "do as thou wilt," which to me reads, I mean, and who the hell knows what it actually means, but to me it reads as very like ego driven, very almost like objectivist fundamentally, right? And it's a lot more complicated than that because he's insane. But I mean, like, I could see that being, you know, a fundamental cause is like the pursuit of perfection. There is no higher pursuit. And so you would do anything at any cost to understand that truth. And that would drive them, make them very selfish and potentially dangerous in that way.
Yeah.
Fun fact. Did you know that L. Ron Hubbard met Aleister Crowley and fucking hated him?
I actually do know that, because I remember I don't know what I read, but it was all about L. Ron's history and Est and all of the self-help stuff that came before Scientology. But it's very interesting.
Okay. I don't have time to get into L. Ron Hubbard and the rocket program. We don't have time for that. But man, that's also really interesting. But okay. Yes. Okay. Loving what's happening. I love this idea of like false ascendancy through removing your soul piece by piece. That's really cool. I love all of that for sure. So Daniel, I believe you're our final and last tenet. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the word chakra in some context means wheel. And so my prompt is that there is a literal giant wheel involved in the setting of cosmic importance that is being threatened with destruction.
Ooh.
Oh, I haven't done this recently or enough, but everyone who's listening to this should go and read Kill 6 Billion Demons. It's a web comic. It's free. You can read all of it. It's phenomenal. But there is a character in that story known as the Wheel Smashing Lord. And I love the idea that like the wheel is an important aspect to this. Maybe not in a reincarnation sense, but just in general, like the idea that a wheel is involved in some way. And I'm thinking of a wheel with like eyes on it for some reason, because that's just where my brain goes. But yeah, that's what I got.
Eyes always make it nicer.
Yeah. Wheel with eyes just makes me think of biblically accurate angels. But
Also correct, yes.
yeah, like I think where I'm going with this is that the ones who have removed, all those aspects of themselves, they're seeking this wheel. Like maybe it's still undiscovered and they're trying to find it, and that's part of why they've done this in the first place, is they think that by removing these pieces they'll be able to see the wheel and access it, and potentially destroy it or like overpower it, make it theirs.
Oh.
So it's all about like
Ooh.
gaining the ultimate amount of control over everything and like literally being able to turn the wheel of fate and time.
Yes. Like, like when as you say that, one of the things that I was visualizing, and although this was a terrible movie, all of them, the Doctor Strange films, when he travels in the astral realm or whatever, I remember there had been one split second of a scene of an actual like turning of gears in some crazy mechanist realm. And I can see like this physical wheel being enormous and gigantic in some other hidden realm that is all around us. And perhaps, if they can place all the perfect chakras where they need to be placed, they can control the turning of the wheel, just like you said. I think that would be super cool. And then has metaphysical consequences on the real world, even though it is a physical thing in some other realm.
Yeah. Okay. Remember how we were talking about earlier how these theosophists are trying to create a giant divine puzzle? It's not about creating the puzzle. It's about creating the piece that will allow them control over the wheel. So like they're attempting to conglomerate all of these pieces together in this massive, like maybe it's literally just a gear or maybe it's literally just a lever, but they're trying to create some kind of divine device that will allow them to control that wheel in some way, Daniel.
What is that philosophical term about a fulcrum? Oh, what is it? That you can move the whole world.
Oh, is that a philosophical thing? I thought that was just the guy who invented the lever. He's like, give me a lever long enough and I can move the world, right?
Right, but it has philosophical implications. I remember my philosophy teacher talking about it. In the sense that if you have the key to something, you can solve the whole problem, and oftentimes the key is really tiny. But I could see like the application here in that turning the wheel, you just need these little pieces of each person. And if you add them all up, you have enough leverage to move the whole wheel, which is kind of like their philosophy, I think.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah. That's cool. That's really cool. Shit. Okay. Yeah. Oh man, because now I'm thinking of that, like that the theosophists who have ascended, who have removed all their souls. Like I'm looking at them as like some kind of a weird corrupted hive mind who are like trying to put these pieces together because they think that they can see infinity, but it's like they're entirely wrong about that. So they're just kind of like ripping apart souls for no reason. Basically, they're creating effectively their own hell in some way.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, that like maybe as you remove your chakras, you do literally start to be able to see the gears of the world. Maybe you do see like this massive wheel kind of surrounding the globe or something as you start to remove this, but they obviously don't understand the purpose at all and don't really know what's happening. And I was thinking too, like, are they just creating hell or are they seeing hell? Because maybe hell is the absence of all of these chakras.
I think I found the quotes Archimedes who said this, but the extent of it is give me a place to stand with, and with a lever I will move the whole world. And I think that there's so many ways to read that from an interpretive standpoint, but here I think it's particularly interesting.
I was thinking of Courtney, I was thinking about that idea of like, I like the idea that again, we're looking at these people who have removed these parts of their souls and they're looking into infinity. And it's like, imagine that we're looking at a computer board, right? But the only tools that we have are like rocks. It's like, all right, we've got to make the computer work with the rocks that we have, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's effectively what I feel like they're trying to do is they're trying to move the levers of creation with the most rudimentary tools possible, because that's just the level that they're operating at.
Right. It's like a bunch of ants trying to like roll over a wheel, like a car wheel or something. It's like you can't really do that.
Oh, they'll be able to eventually, given enough, like given
Yeah.
infinite time and infinite ants, it can happen.
Yeah.
But
And then they'll just crush themselves with the wheels.
yeah, oh, what a perfect metaphor. Exactly. Yes.
I really love that. Like the power of you don't understand the cosmic power of the wheel and it will crush you. And they don't want to face that reality.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, that's really good. That's great. Okay. We've got to move on here because this is a one-parter, remember? So we've got to do the twist and everything here.
Mhm.
So real quick, let's go ahead and do our tenets again. Courtney, what was your first tenet? You started us off today.
Yep. Mine is that like art auctions on Earth, there's a major auction event that takes place in this world where the wealthy elite gather, bid on most desirable souls. And I'd say we definitely tied that into the whole setting pretty well. And I like how it ended up being part of this like mass conspiracy kind of thing.
I feel like that was like definitely the bedrock of not just the setting, but also the aesthetic that I had in my mind too, and like the possibility and the vibe. So yeah. I thought that was well integrated as well, for sure. My first tenet was when the soul is it extracted into a mundane object, even though it's like a fantastical object? What I mean is like it's not inherently mystical or magical in that way. Like you can't use it like a fireball or something like that. And yeah, I feel like we've done that pretty well. I feel like it has different implications within the world itself, and I'm happy with how it's ended up.
Yeah. I had a nefarious school of theosophical psychics who collect soul stuff to reveal an underlying truth behind all religions, like a puzzle. And I think we've solved that.
Yeah.
Oh, we've solved the puzzle, Daniel. Yes, you're absolutely correct. So, Courtney, what was your second tenet?
It was sort of a half-baked tenet in that basically the souls are sort of just floating around and have to be like actively harvested or tempted or captured in some way. And I like how that ended up being, there's multiple ways to go about it. And those can be associated with different factions in the world and might also have different like efficacy as far as how they work.
Absolutely. Spirit photography, mass rituals, different books you got to read, or just proton packs, whatever you got. Yeah, absolutely. My second tenet kind of was like two tenets, but very simply, it was the magic school is evil. And again, considering the ant wheel crushing metaphor we just got, I feel like we've done a good job of explaining that quite well.
Yeah.
Also, I love what we did with the magic school, because it's not just like a Harry Potter school. It's like, no, we're talking Madame Blavatsky here, which I think is like it's super cool. I love what we did with that. So Daniel, what was your second tenet? What did you get with us there?
The literal giant wheel of cosmic importance, threatened with destruction, which I think we accomplished.
We've integrated that well into the conspiracy, into the setting. Absolutely. I'm right there with you. And so, with our tenets recapped, we now have to roll right into the twist for this particular episode. So our twist for this time is everyone has an animal companion. That is submitted by one Diploraptor, a patron of ours. So remember that if you want us to add your twist to the twist list, by all means, become a patron and you can have your twist on the show. So everyone's got an animal companion now. What are we doing with this? Is it a physical animal companion? I'm thinking it's more of a metaphorical or perhaps a spiritual one. What are we thinking? How are we reconciling with the twist?
Right away, with the idea of like the soul-oriented world and animal companions, that makes me think to the His Dark Materials books, where everyone has a daemon animal companion, and they can shapeshift while you're young, but once you go through adolescence, puberty, they kind of solidify their form as an
Mhm.
adult. So maybe something like that could work here, where everybody is born with like a little soul companion, and maybe it's not like a literal, animal that sits on their shoulder, but maybe it is more of like a spiritual guide, but could go in that direction.
Like a homunculus almost.
Mm.
Ooh, a homunculus is kind of interesting because I'm also imagining that you might be able to create a homunculus out of like, oh no, that would go against my own thing. Damn it. Okay, never mind.
I had a thought that instead of saying everyone, I could see the theosophists in particular having these little demons created as a result of extracting all their soul bits
Yes.
Mm.
that are similar to the materials one, but they're evil.
Yeah,
Mm.
no, I'm with you on that one. That's great. Okay. Hold on. So I know that we've talked about the extraction bit, right? What if the theosophists aren't fully extracting these parts of their souls and they're crafting the homunculus or the daemon out of those soul pieces? So it doesn't ruin my tenet, which says that it becomes inert and mundane, but they're not doing that. They're not like fully extracting it. They're merely like taking the essence and like muting it into something that is a homunculus or daemon or whatever you want to call it.
I mean, I think the notion of them being accidental to the process might save you there, because I almost feel like these things, if they seem to have some kind of astral quality to them, I almost feel like these things originate in the place that the wheel's in, and perhaps fudging with creating these objects in the way that theosophists do gives rise to their existence as a result, and because they don't seem to be desirable things, you know what I mean, these beings. And it would be interesting to have a devil on your shoulder from that other realm, that's kind of urging you or manipulating you, because at the end of the day, you're not supposed to be messing with destiny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can we pervert this twist just a little bit and say that when they're doing this, it's not that they're creating a companion, but something that's like trying to hunt them down or something like that? Like, because that sounds kind of fun to me, where it's like, hey, I'm not creating an animal buddy. I'm creating a predator that's going to chase me throughout the astral realm or something like that.
Ooh, I'm thinking now that literally everyone does have one of these things that is basically like when your time is up on this particular plane, they come and collect you. And it's basically like your own personal death spirit. But with like you were saying, Rob, with this manipulation of the chakras, and Daniel, like you were saying, it does maybe strengthen it or sends it out sooner from the wheel or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, we're basically subverting their whole process, right? Like if we're putting souls into objects, the person doesn't die in the traditional sense, and this is probably a problem for these creatures if that's they're messengers of this process, right?
Yeah.
So that makes them antagonists fundamentally.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you're doing as well, right? Like you're creating a near-death experience in a living body. And so this thing is going to come be like, yo, this is fucked up. I'm trying to do my job here, guys. But you're not like, you're kind of, you're fucking with the process here. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you're exactly right, Daniel. That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Courtney, both of you guys got it, but still.
Yeah, speaking like the near-death experience, like maybe that is why they feel like they're being more enlightened as time goes on, because it does feel like a near-death experience each time they remove that chakra from themselves. Like the more they remove, the more of an ecstasy it is. But in reality, it literally is like death is coming closer to you. Like the more you do this.
Yeah.
Well, and what you're saying blends into the impishness of them, because if their goal, if they've expressed theosophical goal, is to assemble all these pieces into a blimp's perfection, from the imp's perspective, they're going to get their souls back. So I can see them wanting to sit on the shoulder of this theosophist and tempt them further, because it's like, sure, keep doing that, because eventually I'm going to get you and all the pieces that you've stolen back,
Yeah.
Feels like enlightenment, but is actually damnation. Like, I love that kind of like twist to it. That's really good. Oh man, that's so fucking fun. Oh, that's good. Okay.
It also makes me think of the tinctures in the Jack Vance novels, and that's what the D&D's magic is based on. That they would capture these like imp-like creatures and trap them in the stones, and then torment them to get their powers out of them. So this is similar, except that these creatures are visiting you because you're messing with stuff you're not supposed to.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. This is such a cool setting. All right, this is great. All right. Okay. we reconciled the twist. What a hell of an episode. What a great setting. I'm just thinking about all the possibilities for like a main storyline quest that we could be doing here, like a heist. Like I already said at the top, Ocean's 11, but with soul stuff. There's so much that you can do with here. So a big thank you to one JG for the first time submission for your prompt. And again, if you want us to build your world, build your prompt, go to our website, click the link, follow some instructions, and within a reasonable amount of time, we'll be building your world. And of course, if you want 2 episodes instead of 1 for your prompt, you can get that by becoming a patron on our Patreon, along with other sorts of great patron exclusive goodies. And yeah, you can do that with the link in the description. We're also on social media, YouTube and Twitter. If you're listening to this on YouTube, thank you very much. Click the like, subscribe button, all that good stuff. If you're over on Twitter, at Let's World Build, thanks for the follow. We appreciate you as well. And of course, if you want to talk to us more directly, we've got a Discord, so check the Discord out. Come chat with us about your world or just about anything in particular. Doesn't really matter. It kind of matters. Just keep it, appropriate. Anyway, with all of that out of the way, that's going to do it for this episode of World Build with us. Remember that we love you very much. We're going to get through this together. Until next week.